Welcome back to Endurance Icons, where we sit down with individuals who are excelling and inspiring in the world of endurance sports. We are your hosts, Mark and Jessica Cullen, and today we are talking to Ben Pobjoy. Now, there was a night recently where I was scrolling through LinkedIn and I said to Mark, stop everything. We need to interview this man. The Peak, which is a newsletter I assume many of you are very aware of, shared this journey with his followers, and I have to tell you this story. I cannot wait to dive in. So Ben is currently in the process of tackling the Marathon Earth Challenge, where he will aim to break the Guinness World Record for the most marathons completed in a calendar year. We have so many questions about this. So Ben, welcome to the show. We're so happy to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here as well.
So I first need to ask, where are you joining us from? Because you are going all around the world on this challenge.
Yeah, I am currently joining you from beautiful Mexico City. To all the Canadians going through the polar vortex. It is quite cool down here. It's only about 14 degrees. So, I share your pain.
So we definitely are feeling that pain. We did a workout this morning and the winds are bitter. For anyone who's watching this on YouTube, there's a beautiful background that shows the location of Ben. So we're feeling a little jealous there. But Ben, I'd love to talk about what you have on tap today. Do you have a run plan today, or is today a recovery day for you?
No, I'm actually going to go pound out a marathon right after this call. And my wife is joining me at 1 o'clock Mexico time. I haven't seen her in 5 weeks. So definitely going to go quick and get it done.
Amazing. Well, we will try not to take too long for you in that case. But firstly, how are you feeling? And you're on marathon number what at this point?
Yeah, I'm feeling quite good. I've done 29 marathons since the start of the year with, another kind of 210 to go. It is quite a busy schedule of 5 marathons a week with kind of 2 rest days, which for video or audio listeners, I'm doing in kind of quotations because they're pretty much like travel days. So it's quite hectic, but the way I've kind of mentally made sense of it is it's just like going to a job 5 days a week doing physical labor. And I have a weekend off, and the weekend days off are kind of unpredictable.
Which is fair. And you said you're feeling fairly good at this point. I think in solidarity to you, we did a very, very difficult workout this morning. We didn't run a marathon. We ran 29 kilometers into a headwind. So we have all this fueling around us right now. We decided to come in sort of tired for you. But we have certainly not done 29 marathons. I would love to know, were you a runner growing up? How did this passion start for you?
Yeah, I was actually I would say objectively quite a pathetic athlete growing up my whole life. Played recreational soccer because my parents are, British immigrants, and did a bit of track and field, played a bit of recreational hockey where I accidentally scored a goal, but I'm as every man as they come. And truthfully, my kind of tripping into endurance sports was sort of by accident. And much like Forrest Gump, I kind of started and just kind of kept going.
I love that. And I know from, the moment that I saw this incredible attempt, one of the things about me is that I instantly get a PhD in anything I'm fascinated about. I dive in, I research everything. And one of the things we uncovered is that in 2015, you did something huge. In fact, you lost 100 pounds. I'd love to hear a little bit about what that journey was like for you.
Yeah, so it was quite interesting. During my kind of teens and 20s, I was somewhat physical. And then I went to university, which I didn't enjoy. And I found that I kind of turned inwards and just ended up doing a lot of emotional eating, and kind of fast forward a few years, ended up morbidly obese as I kind of entered the advertising and marketing industry, which is a world of late nights and dinners brought to your desks. And I professionally thrived as I kind of personally withered, and then was brought back to a job in Toronto where I kind of had this very embarrassing collision with millennials. And I kind of showed up to the party as the wild child, as I had all these young colleagues that were oh, I don't party. I spin on this day and I do Pilates on that day. And I was so embarrassed by how much that I stuck out. Ooh, I might have to move now as soon as I turn on a hot tub. That, I pretty much just started thinking about how to change my life. I was so embarrassed by my kind of physical conditioning that I started walking. And that was kind of like my entry point to, start going further and further and change my lifestyle.
Well, that is inspiring. I love it. Often to make a change like that, there is that one moment, and it sounds like that was a pretty profound moment. This has absolutely nothing to do with what we were talking about, but the windows in your room are beautiful. You just gave a little bit of a tour as you were walking.
Totally.
It's like
This is
such a
this is
well
like the
lit.
roof. This is like the rooftop. So, excuse me. It's not my room, but it's a pretty sweet space.
Wow, it's beautiful. Okay, what do you love about running?
Well, I think like I first just want to preface that, since 2015, I've done like 63,000 kilometers by foot, more than like 600 kilometers. And I don't really like identify as a runner because to essentially achieve that much speed, that much kind of like distance, I go like very slow. And I think what's unique about my approach is that I have like a backpack on full of camera gear.
Mhm.
And to me, doing these freestyle marathons, which is like a marathon beyond a course, I really do it because I'm a creative at heart. And I think it's like the best medium to observe the human condition, like, running through Tokyo or New York or barrios or shanty towns. And so for me, it essentially enables this kind of pace to kind of really observe the world as it is, not through a moving car or a tour bus or a taxi cab. And it just makes me feel really like grounded to the world and really like inspired by all the tenacity I see. I think in the endurance world, a lot of people are like, there's this like killer savage attitude. And let's not kid ourselves, exercise is elective and a lot of people have it like harder than most. And when I feel like I'm going to quit and I see these people like really busting their asses out there, like that does put wind in my sails. So I just love being out in the world and physically moving through it.
That's incredible. And I know that you touched on the fact that you worked in advertising and marketing. You quit that job to do this. I'd love to talk a little bit about like that decision-making process, what led you there, and then talk about how you are bringing all of those incredible skill sets into what you're doing right now.
Yeah, totally. So during, I guess, 2021, during the lockdown in Ontario, which was one of the longest lockdowns in the world, which like I totally get. I'm into being in part of the social contract. I did like 174 marathons in the calendar year. And for a joke, I submitted the results to the Guinness Book of World Records because it only cost like £5 and they kind of rejected it, saying it was too niche. So I was like, if I did that with like a really difficult job, like, and I became fun employed, like I bet I could pretty easily break that world record. So much to the dismay of my wife, who's like a responsible adult, I quit my job and sold everything and went all chips in. And I think for me, the kind of skills I brought from the advertising world, where I kind of worked on campaigns, was just kind of like storytelling and making beautiful imagery. And that's what I'm doing in this project right now.
So talk to us a little bit about that documentary. You're taking, images, video through all of this. What are you seeing for this end result?
I mean, I just do these things to do these things and put out a lot of free content in the world because I think it brings people like yourself into my orbit and also inspires others. So the task at hand is like very difficult. So I'm trying to do it like day by day, like, almost marathon by marathon, and what will be, will be. But what I hope, you know, everybody kind of paid a price living through the pandemic. And what I hope is that what I'm revealing through the imagery is like the world is still a beautiful place that we should cherish and hopefully get outside and go kind of examine and explore.
So you say you're seeing your wife for the first time in 5 weeks. She's the responsible one. Talk to us a little bit about the support that you have with your family behind this. I mean, it's incredible that she's coming to visit you. Talk about maybe how that conversation went and how that dynamic and support works now.
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, first, like I obviously have to give like huge props to my wife. She's actually one of the editors at the Toronto Star. So her more so than anyone else, like gets a kind of newsworthy story. I just think that she personally hated that this like applied to her. So there definitely was like a lot of negotiation because my mom likes to joke that she married like an alley cat, so you can't expect like a house cat. That said, I think when you have divergent dreams, they can be a nightmare for the other person. So this is very much an idea that was created in consultation with her. And I'm coming home in between legs. She's coming out to see me, and she has obviously given me an incredibly long leash, and it's my duty not to hang myself with that.
So awesome. Let's dive into this journey a little bit. I think we got tons of questions that we can hop into based on the planning, what you've already done, where you're going with this. Maybe let's start out with kind of when did you initially like kind of commit to this idea, and what was kind of your initial like planning around locations and logistics for this?
Yeah, so almost about like a year ago, I had like a virtual town hall at work where they celebrated my 8th year anniversary, and I just saw like an infinity symbol on my desktop, and so I just like quit my job the next day um, because it felt like endless. And then when I quit my job and told my wife, somehow she wasn't surprised, but then I was like, what am I going to do next? And I was like, oh, cool. I'm just going to go do this thing. So I came up with the Marathon Earth Challenge based on being rejected by Guinness World Records. I was like, cool. I'm going to move along and prove them wrong. And then given how quickly the world changes, and obviously wanting to trek through ideal weather conditions, I sequenced where I would go based on ideal weather patterns, trying to beat like the Canadian winters or rainy monsoon seasons. And so I have sequenced that continentally to do 4 legs. So I'm kind of in South America now. Then I go to kind of Africa, Middle East, then to Europe, then close out the year in Asia. And I kind of book everything leg by leg because as we've seen over the last year, the world can change so quickly. Like Pakistan was washed out, war broke out in Ukraine. And if you've ever booked an airline ticket and you tried to get a refund, it's impossible. So I'm kind of booking it leg by leg. And then doing kind of real postmortems in between with my wife to say, am I gone too long? And, renegotiating the original negotiation so she doesn't divorce me.
Yeah, for sure.
It's smart.
You mentioned a number of the locations there. Do you have like Canada and the US planned in that as well?
Partially, I've just done like Canada so often. And this really is a once in a lifetime opportunity that I want to see new parts of the world. And to be honest, like, I am traveling through dangerous places, but I just find America to be like one of the most dangerous places in the world with like gun violence that's like out of control. And I know that sounds crazy to people who maybe have not traveled, but it's just a bit of a kind of a failed state right now. So I'm avoiding stuff like the US and Somalia.
Yep. So let's talk a little bit about, so you said you're 29 in the bank so far?
29 in the bank.
Nice. Tell us about some of your locations you've been and maybe your favorite ones that you've been through thus far. It looks like you hit pretty much everywhere in South America.
Yeah, because of the nature of this trip, like I have to kind of stick to capital cities because of proximity to airports. So there's so many beautiful places that I'm missing. And I want to acknowledge that because people might be like, why are you always in cities? But, I did a red eye flight and I ended up in La Paz, Bolivia, which is like 3,600 meters above elevation, above sea level, sorry, where there's so much incline everywhere and thin air that it was just so wild. So that was really interesting. And then I did like a marathon on the Galapagos and was like hanging out with like tortoises and sea lions. And I honestly don't know if that's like ever been done. So that was like super rad. There's no cell service. So I have like a Garmin satellite device I'm trying to navigate on. And then, yeah, I mean, like every place is fundamentally awesome if you put in the time to marathon through it and look for the gems that it reveals. So yeah, but I mean, like crazy elevation down here, wildlife, it's been incredible.
And when you look at the flow, often when you talk to anyone who's done anything, this type of, cross continent adventuring, there's always some element of misadventure. Have you had any sort of snags in your travel or any things that you've needed to overcome so far?
Knock on wood, this one has gone really well so far. But on marathons past, like Buenos Aires, like a woman like jumped on my back and bit like a chunk out of my arm. She was like mentally unwell. Oh yeah, and then last time I was in Mexico, like
I think that fits what we were looking for.
yeah, and then like last time I was in Mexico, like a cop robbed me, but I always carry a dummy wallet, so he didn't get anything. And then like in Toronto, someone like slashed me in the leg with a knife. So like that happens, and the world like isn't a dangerous place, and I don't like to kind of glamorize that. It's really just like the law of averages. Like if you spend as much time as I do outside, there's just that exposure, and you just have to accept that. So far here, so good. I had a bit of like a lung infection, I think from like Colombia, from like the pollution. It's quite diesely down here, but I got over that. And then appetite gets affected at elevation, but beyond that, so far so good. No one plans an accident, so it's going to be awesome until the second that it isn't.
Well, the fact that was oh yeah, and then these stories, I feel like you could experience what most people would feel is like a sincere misadventure, and you would take it in stride and just say, this is just a part of the experience. I'm getting that vibe from you. So.
Yeah, I don't look for it. There's also another time I did like an ultra marathon from Jerusalem and in the West Bank, and then like this armed skirmish broke out in Palestine, and like I literally was just like running through chaos. I was like, that one was kind of crazy. But also like yesterday I was in like Brasilia, the capital of Brazil, and it obviously had just been kind of sacked, like the Capitol building. They just did like a copycat of the US. And so I wanted to get up close, didn't think it was like realistic. But then there was like Secret Service being let in. So I just ran in and I met the president. So I posted about that on Instagram yesterday because I just got a selfie with the president, and that's like mad funny. So the world is like a magical place. And if you just like go poke around, you'll have a good time.
It's true. So question for you, with all of these adventures that you're collecting, and because these really are incredible stories, Ben, do you have any aspirations of putting it together in a book, or collecting all of this as sort of a work at the end of this experience?
Yeah, I think so. I think like, you have to do these things to do them. This is like quite demanding. Like doing 5 marathons a week is like, I'm doing over 200 kilometers a week. So that's the focus. But I have created like a newsletter that I am publishing like every week. It's free, and it kind of recounts a lot of these stories like in a long form, nonfiction type of style. So that was done just to kind of bring everyone along for the ride, and to kind of like share hyper links to kind of absolutely all the amazing places that I find. And then thereafter, might possibly write a book. But for like memoirs, like I'm only like 41. And if you write it now, what happens for the rest of your life, So who knows? I think like maybe it'll materialize. I have no clue. But for right now, just trying to share it for free on social and through the newsletter to inspire people to get out there.
And people can find that newsletter on your website?
Yes, benpobjoy.com. Hopefully you guys can list the spelling in the show notes, because his last name is a nightmare.
No, we'll definitely share that in the show notes. How do you fit in? Because a newsletter is a great deal of work, especially when you're collecting all of these links. Where are you fitting in the time to make sure that you are producing, number one, this incredible free content to inspire people online, and a newsletter, which could be some people's full-time job, and you're layering in this incredible record on top?
Yeah, the newsletter was something I had never done. And was kind of like sold to me by Brett Chang from the Peak, who's a friend, and my brother, who does like a dental focused newsletter called The Morning Floss. And so I was like, yeah, I'll do this. And then when I started doing it, I was like, this thing is such a beast. Like it probably takes like, I don't know, 20 hours a week. And so, I'm out marathoning as I'm shooting photos, as I'm taking notes, and then I come home exhausted and spend like hours writing. So had I known how long it would take, I probably wouldn't have done it. But now I'm in. So I'm just trying to make it happen. And I don't need a lot of sleep. I've been on 20 flights this year, so I kind of work on it on airplanes and in airport terminals, and then sometimes pull an all-nighter on Friday to try and publish Saturday morning. But yeah, the newsletter is a nightmare, so I hope people get something from it.
That's why I leaned in on that, because you just sort of threw out the newsletter. it is something that to do well, which you are doing, it takes, I just wanted to underscore how much time that takes on top of what you're doing.
Yeah, and I think for anyone interested out there, I'm trying to kind of like break the mold in endurance sports in terms of like the storytelling around it. So I think if you like travel or photography or arts and culture, like you will get something from the newsletter, because I'm pretty much operating like a foreign correspondent doing marathons, trying to kind of document everything. So it's not like a hardcore read for people who want kind of, statistics and splits and stuff like that. So I try and keep it broad, mostly because, I want people out in the world.
No, and I think that's why you're here. People love the story of it. They love the adventure of it. And I think that that's ultimately when we really lean into why people do endurance. What I repeatedly hear is, finding your limits and exploring and getting to have these adventures. And, there's so many incredible ways to do that. And I love that you are finding such a unique way to do it and hopefully, setting this incredible world record along the way. So you mentioned that you don't need a lot of sleep. How much sleep do you get on average through all of this?
It really varies. Like, on a good night is kind of like 8 hours. But like the other day, I did 2 marathons in 2 days and then did a red eye flight to Brasilia, where I got no sleep. And then I landed and did a marathon. And then I did a red eye to get to like Mexico. Yesterday, I don't even know what date is. Maybe I've slept 2 hours and then I'm going to go marathon. And so it physically sucks and it is difficult, but when you have these new external inputs, it's so inspiring that you can just kind of like bite down on your, proverbial mouth guard and kind of get it done. So there's not a lot of sleep. I'm also vegan, which is like such a nightmare, it's like, I regret it so much, but I have a vegan tattoo, so I kind of got to stick with it.
Committed.
So like that adds another layer of difficulty of like grocery shopping and eating. So this whole thing is like a nightmare that's a dream, it's the only way I can say it.
So how do you manage being vegan while you travel? I hear, so it's a nightmare, but you clearly are making it work.
Yeah, I mean, the joking aside, much of the world lives on like a plant-based diet where like meat is a luxury. So the great thing about South America, because of the temperate climate, is there's so many street vendors. So it's actually like amazing because you can just be like marathoning and then there's like fruit stands and coconut water. And one thing I found was amazing was eating like a deep fried plantain like halfway through a marathon, which like seems like a terrible idea. And I thought it could be a terrible idea, but the kind of ratio of like fat to carb to sugar was just like incredible. So you just kind of make it happen. And it's what I love about, my self-described freestyle marathons is I don't have coaches. I don't have water stations. I don't have like porta potties that I can hit. It's just like problem solving along the way. And that's like part of the fun for me. So yeah, it's definitely not for everyone. And I think what other people would see as incredibly inconvenient, I just see as like a really fun challenge.
I love that. When did you go vegan?
Oh, God, I read like just such a stupid book in high school. And then like over like 25 years ago. And then now I've just like stayed with it just to kind of terrorize everyone in my life,
You might be my new favorite vegan, Ben.
Yeah, I mean, I hate identifying as that because we have like such a bad rep, you know what I mean? But I would say like on this trip, the definition of veganism is like as dumpster as it gets, like there are times when I have to eat just like 30 Oreos because it's like all I can find. So this is just making it work,
Well, I think that's a perfect segue into, we asked our audience to submit questions. We had mentioned that we're going to be meeting with you today. So I'd like to dive into some of those. They're so interested in how you recover from this day after day. You said that you have 5 days in a week. It's sort of like a work week for you. And then you take 2 days off. What are you doing in between there to expedite your recovery outside of eating 30 Oreos?
Nothing, absolutely nothing, to be like dead honest. So like I would say like over the last 8 years, like when you do kind of like 63,000 plus kilometers, like I'm often doing like 10,000 plus kilometer years. So every day I am going like rain or shine. And I think people would be surprised how quickly your body adapts. So, like on this trip, I have like blisters on blisters. I have like black toes. And that's just kind of the way it goes. And, historically, I've done Cairo, I've done RMT. I have like a Theragun that my wife bought me that I hate. That thing's like a torture device. I've done supplements. And because I knew the kind of restrictions of this trip, like I essentially weaned myself off of it because I just knew it would be hell and I'd have like none of those luxuries. So there's no recovery. It's terrible, like, and the days that I have off, I'm on airplanes. And then when you get off the airplane, like you feel even worse. Like your calves are cramped, your feet are all like inflamed. So they actually just turned on a hot tub today. And like this whole time I wanted to jump in the water anywhere, but I can't because like I'll get robbed because like I have no one to watch my backpack. So I think after doing like 29 marathons, going in the hot tub will probably be pretty dope. So that's the first chance of recovery, I guess.
And now your wife can watch your backpack, so you can go into the hot tub.
I know, it's amazing. She doesn't swim, so it's perfect.
Oh my gosh. Another question. So it was submitted, and now I'm even more curious hearing about what you're up against. How do you not get injured?
Well, I think like two things. For me, my passion is going slow to going far. And so I really try and be kind of like slow in my pace and light in my gait so that like I don't crunch like my knees and my hips. But down here in South America, where there is a lot of like incline and elevation, like some of the sidewalks, like I kind of periodically post photos. They're like ankle snapping, and there's just like holes like in the floor, like 4 feet, you'll just fall into like raw sewage. So you just got to be like really careful. And given that I've done so many kilometers, I kind of know how to like shift on my body to kind of like change my stride from like a heel strike to being on the pads of my feet, even changing my posture so that I'm really aligned over my hips. And I've just been kind of lucky. And the reality is like injuries like do flare up, but I knew what I was signing up for. I've done like projects before where I did like 5 ultras in 5 days across like Australia and New Zealand. And then when I turned 40, I did like 9 marathons in 9 days in 9 different countries in like Europe. So I have done stuff like this before. I know that it's like kind of like terrible / fun. And I've just kind of adapted to it, I guess.
It's incredible.
And another question we got was, how do you avoid like blisters and chafing because you're out there for a marathon 5 days in a row a lot of times? Like, how do you avoid some of that stuff?
Yeah, this trip is like a bit of a challenge because everything I have has to fit on my back in a backpack. Like I have no luggage. I have no race producers or fixers or places where I can send things so far ahead. So I do have like a 30-pound bag on my back quite often. And so like,
during the marathon.
There was like, cause it just has everything, like my passports, my camera, like change of clothes, like some useless first aid kit that isn't going to do anything if things go wrong. So yeah, I mean like, have had chafing on my back. My feet, I knew I'd have like blisters. And like one of the things that was like just really unfortunate about the parameters of like this trip is I could only bring 1 pair of shoes. So you just get that same rubbing like every day. But I've learned like my feet are like disgusting. And I've learned that like if I don't touch them and I just let them kind of like callus, they just become these like exoskeletons. So I'll never start an OnlyFans for my feet. But
I mean, that niche might be out there, Ben. You'd never know.
Yeah, don't shut the door on
it. I know. So like, yeah, it all happens. And it's like, I think the one thing I just, joking aside, I try and be like very on top of is like, tending to any kind of like broken skin, because if you get infections in these conditions where it's like, 35 degrees Celsius with like 70% humidity, it's like game over. And like, so far, so good.
Oh man. And how many toenails left are we talking at this point?
Somehow, like I only have like one black toe, like on my big
Okay.
toe, and it's like holding on. But like the first 2 weeks were like pretty intense because the like inclines and the kind of rockiness, if people are not watching on video, I'm kind of like rotating my hand, but really like jacking my ankle. So like my foot was really kind of shaking around in my shoe, but kind of like over that hump for now for the time being.
Nice. What are some locations coming up that you're like really looking forward to?
Yeah, locations coming up. I think I'm very excited to get like back to Africa, which is like a continent I haven't done a lot of marathoning through. I've only gone to Marrakesh before, so going to Ethiopia will be amazing. I'm gonna go to like Iraq to go marathon there, which I think will be quite fascinating. Getting back to like Asia, like I think, you know, Japan is like one of the most phenomenal places to like marathon. It is just like such a remarkable place. And like truthfully, like I feel like it is such a blessing to be able to travel to anywhere else and do a marathon there, that like there's always something that I find that makes it worthwhile.
And what about like the language barriers? How do you deal with that? Because are you like, can you speak a number of different languages? Or are you just
Yeah,
lots of hand signs as you're
yeah,
you're there?
exactly. I can speak obviously English. I hope this podcast is like a testament to that, as well as French, because I grew up in France and then did French immersion. But beyond that, you know, my Spanish is kind of like very limited. I will say, like, I would not have been able to do a project like this 10 years ago. It is so technology dependent with my smartphone. So everything from using, you know, Google Maps and All Trails to navigate to kind of some of these like translation apps now where, you know, through the Google app, you can take photos of menus in other language. It translates into, you know, your kind of like mother tongue. So there are barriers, but I do find like technology more and more is like breaking that down. And there's a lot of gestures to, you know,
Mhm.
Mhm.
to make it work.
Nice. So you had mentioned that you before this podcast that you had grown a beard for sun protection. What were some of the other like surprises kind of along the way that you needed to kind of adapt to over these first 29 marathons to make sure that yeah, you're not getting sunburnt or injured and things like that?
It's mostly just going through airport security and how like arbitrary it is in every place. Like at one airport, they took like my, you know, like a straight razor, like just a Gillette one, and I was like, great. So like now I just like look even worse. And then I've had a lot of problems with like my Garmin satellite communication device, because I have like a backpack of like all this camera gear, and I wear dog tags embossed with like my passport information in case I ever get like blasted by a car and they got to identify my body. So I think when I go through security, they think I'm like military or like CIA, and so I just always have like tons of problems. So that's just been like the biggest nightmare, and I'm just like, I don't know, and I pull out my phone, I show maps, I go, look, I'm doing these like little marathons everywhere. And then they get so confused. I'm just like, oh, piss off. So that's it so far.
How many pairs of shoes do you go through?
I mean, on this one, this whole project is like entirely self-funded. Um, Not by choice, just by like kind of like reality. So I don't have like any sponsors. So for right now, like I'm just like ripping in like a pair of kind of like Nike like trail shoes. So you know, I think there's like common convention on how quickly one should change their shoes, approximately every 700 kilometers. But like I'm stretching these for like thousands right now, you know? So it just
Nike,
keeps like
send this
the
man a pair of
Yeah,
shoes.
send him some
yeah,
alpha
I'm
flies.
like
Let's go.
just doing it out here. But you know, it was funny because I did reach out to like every brand I could think of, and no one really responded, because I think in this day and age, I exist like in a weird place where I'm like, I'm not an influencer, I don't have a big social following, and like I don't do races because I just like to kind of explore in the world. So I don't think anyone knows what to make of me. So that's why I have one pair of shoes.
feel like your TikTok would blow up with all these wild stories and the live
God,
footage along the way.
Mark,
you know
Not that
what?
anybody
Like
wants. I
I
don't
was
want to do
trying.
TikTok either.
No, I was trying to do TikTok, but I'm like 40 and I'm balding. And it just makes me feel like such a loser. Like I feel like that old guy at the club. So like I did a few, but I'm just like, this is so embarrassing for me. So I'm more like just photos of the world for the time
Yeah,
being, you
I
know?
respect that. That's more our vibe too. We do it
Yeah.
out of necessity, but yeah, I don't enjoy it either.
Yeah.
it's fun to learn, and I do think I personally think your TikTok would blow up, and you don't need to be embarrassed, Ben. But if any sponsors are listening, I do think that there's an incredible niche out there for you of, there are brands that align with this whole idea of adventure. And it's not just about, take lactate testing and getting your splits. That, I mean, we do it for the joy of it as well. And I think your attitude and sort of the general, I would say, vibe you're bringing to it, it's laid back, and it's one of like curiosity and interest, and I would say so much respect for the different places that you're visiting. So we look forward to following your journey. We've talked a little bit about what you want to produce as a part of this, but I'd love to dig into what legacy do you want to leave as a part of this adventure?
Yeah. When you ask that question, I had never really like kind of like thought about it, because I don't. Everyone is always like, life is so short. I'm like, life is so long, you know. So I'm here for a good time, not a long time. I just think, I hope my legacy is that it's never too late to turn it around. Like, in my 30s, I was like morbidly obese. I lost like 100 pounds through beginning to move. And, I just fundamentally believe that we're all more capable than we think we are. And I want people to go out into the world and be inspired about it and don't be afraid about it, and to go live kind of like raw and unfiltered. Like, the news does kind of distill things into very snackable bites for us to kind of like digest, but the world is like a very nuanced place. And so, had I just listened to the internet about all the places I would go, like I wouldn't have gone, because everything's dangerous and it's this and that. But it's like, when you get out there, like, working people are just trying to work, and people love their friends and family and want to enjoy one another and like to play in the park. And so get out there and see it and be inspired by it and contribute to it. So I hope that's the legacy of like unending like optimism and curiosity. And when things go wrong, just accepting that it's the law of averages.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Well, that's a pretty great legacy, Ben. We invited you on because you're an endurance icon to us, because what you're doing is absolutely incredible and inspiring. But love to know, who's your endurance icon?
Yeah, definitely the first person that comes to mind is like Terry Fox. Like, as a Canadian, I think he's like a real icon. I love that he set, such like a massive project, like really inspired me to do this project. And I love that like his legacy has been a yearly event where it's non-competitive and you kind of do whatever distance you want. So conceptually, like he's definitely like my biggest like icon. I'm also a really big fan of like the American like Ricky Gates, who did like his Trans America project, where he kind of like ran across America and told stories along the way. And then I just also love like Courtney Dauwalter. Like, she's obviously like such a savage, and I just love that a woman is like decimating like men. I think that's like so incredible. And she's just such a like lovable oddball, like eating pizza and like sour keys. I just kind of really love like her spirit. So those are definitely people who like come to mind. Like, definitely the weirdos and the trailblazers.
I love that. And all three of those people are just top shelf choices. So you have this newsletter that you pull all-nighters and put so much care into. You are sharing incredible, exciting, and inspiring things on your social. Please, I know we've hinted at it, but where do people find you, and how can people support you?
Yeah, you can find me at benpobjoy.com to sign up for the newsletter, which, I kind of believe in making things like free, no strings attached. So, subscribe if it interests you. It's totally free. On Instagram, Ben Pobjoy, once again, where I kind of do like a daily diary where I share photos from that day's like marathon, as well as like the routing. And just because I'm very much like interested in breaking or exploring the kind of like physical digital divide, I started like a monthly postcard project where you can sign up, and I send a postcard once a month from where I am in the world, just to kind of get like a piece of me and a piece of the world and a piece of this adventure in your physical inbox. So all of that is all connected through benpobjoy.com.
Now, with the postcard piece, is that something that people can give you a bit of financial support? Because I imagine there's people who are going to say, is there a tip jar? Is there something that we can do to sort of give back to you on this?
Cover the amount of running shoes you're going through.
The postcard project, like the newsletter project, once again, is proving to be a nightmare because I try and really dedicate myself to each postcard. So it takes a bunch of time. So I also priced it just to be kind of like $10 to make it like affordable. So people can do that, but you know, I don't, if you do this, you got to do it. So I don't do it for like tips or donations. Like if anything, if you're inspired by it and you want to support it, like get out there, you know what I mean? Buy yourself a new pair of running shoes, sort of thing. And that's not to say that I don't want help, but the best tip you can do is to go do it yourself, you know? And so that's what I want people to take from this, as opposed to like, yeah, I could have done a digital tip jar, but this is a luxurious vacation for a year and I'm asking people for tips, you know, seems like a bit self-righteous, you know?
Well, I would love to already schedule a future interview with you when you complete this challenge, because we cannot wait to hear. We can't wait to follow along, but we also want to book some time with you to catch up and hear about all these incredible 200 plus marathons in a year. So consider that booked, and thank you so much. Okay, what an inspiring conversation. Ben is such a cool guy. He self-professed that he is a DIY and a little bit punk approach to this. And I think that that is something that is so refreshing. Zero posturing with Ben. And I, for one, cannot wait to follow the rest of his journey. So just really encouraging each one of you, make sure that you support his journey. If you were at all inspired, follow him, subscribe to that newsletter that he pulls all-nighters to do. You can also become a monthly patron to receive that handwritten monthly postcard from Ben from wherever he is in the world. He does individualize it and takes great care. So I can tell you, Mark and I are signed up and delighted to receive our monthly postcard.
Wow, how great was that? I always learn so much from these endurance icons. If you enjoyed the podcast as well, please consider liking us across social media, subscribing to us on YouTube, or giving us a 5-star rating on wherever you listen to your podcasts. We appreciate you and your support so much. We wish you happy training, and we'll see you back next week.